Not long ago, I uploaded a video on Blade Runner 2049. Its director, Denis Villeneuve, is a filmmaker whose filmography I've been mostly very fond of. And there has been some minor backlash toward him simply because his films aren't critically panned, I think. I think some people don't care for the aesthetic as well, although I think that's... I still think if the films were panned, that they would actually, oh no, I like the aesthetic, whatever. I didn't like all of Villeneuve's films. I thought Sicario was kind of nauseatingly serious. Other than that, I'm pretty sure I'm fond of all of the features. Maelstrom onward, certainly. Dune was magnificent, I felt. It was remarkable to actually see... I mean, obviously I'd read the novel, I'd seen the Lynch version before. I do love the Lynch version in its own right, and yet, the Lynch version didn't quite capture the experience of, oh wow, there's that novel I read just coming alive on the screen. It was more of a novelty factor there in enjoying it as an adaptation, whereas Villeneuve was both a magnificent filmic voyage and also it's like, wow, this is the novel I read coming alive. It was utterly superlative. And so I'm looking to some of Villeneuve's earlier films. I decided I'd give a revisit to Prisoners, which I remember thinking was quite a quality film. I still feel as though this is the case. I was identifying potential issues with Prisoners, though. One, I can imagine it being considered too much of a film wherein its great acclaimed actors do acting things and people go, oh, that's a good performance. What I'm thinking of now is maybe some people think Hugh Jackman's trying a bit too hard. I mean, we tend to think of Jake Gyllenhaal as a really talented actor. We tend to think of someone like Joaquin Phoenix as a really talented actor. Some foolish might think of Leonardo DiCaprio as a really talented actor. It doesn't really matter. The point I'm trying to make is, well, I haven't heard as much criticism of Gyllenhaal's performance, because I think it was a really strong performance, actually, as opposed to one of his worst turns, like in that crappy Nightcrawler film, if you remember that. But then we have, I think... Jackman has a certain Australian complex. I'm an Australian, and, I know most Australians have this complex of, they try way too hard to, fit in with, the artistic world of, America and the UK, the rest of the English-speaking world. There's this whole thing of, oh, we've got to follow the formula of, the greats from America and the UK, and we've got to be like them and look up to them and suck up to them. And it's just, do your own thing. That's what they do, Anyway, but the reason I find myself... after a while, maybe just wears on me enough and I get Stockholm Syndrome. The Jackman performance, it's hard not to deny the believable conviction of that character. It's so easy to put yourself in that character's shoes. The situation and his general response to it is so... it's so relatable and authentic. I mean, no one wants... It's the last thing anyone wants to experience ever is what happens in this film. It's a film about a parent who danger comes upon their child and almost worse perhaps, they don't know. It's one thing if it's a tragic film about, your child dies and, it's all revealed and it's all medical and official and kind of morbid thought still, but I'm not trying to downplay that, but it's almost more morbid, more terrifying, not knowing. And I think that's where the real dread and anxiety of Prisoners comes in. The screenwriter of this film, who tried to shop it around for some time before the lead actors settled upon being Jackman and Gyllenhaal and then its director Villeneuve, he said he was inspired, this script was inspired by Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart. And I think that the utilization of that text tropes in this particular contemporary hostage / criminal investigation narrative, absolutely genius. The way it's woven seamlessly in the influence, I feel. Roger Deakins' cinematography has been extensively praised for this film, and yep, it is very good. It's very clean, very filmic, and yet there is a certain lived-in quality. What I like about the film's aesthetic is it's got a certain... I mean, it's set in Pennsylvania. It's got a certain, I was going to say, middle America aesthetic, and I was about to say Midwest, but that's not geographically accurate, obviously. It's Pennsylvania. It's just kind of instinctive thing to say, given the look. Anyway, what is fascinating about the film is it's almost like the small town aesthetic of American aesthetic is evoking an older time than the early to mid 2010s. The film came out in 2013. It almost reminds one that these characters are trying to live a life that's a bubble of, say, the 1960s, 1950s through to the 1980s, or up to the 1990s. I think that's when that era starts to erode, and like you get the kind of like, you know, obnoxiousness of the Gen X culture and alt rock media, and the kind of like gangster rap eras of the 90s trying to like destroy even the suburbs, become a place of like subversion and disgusting pop punk Blink 182. But the small town America of Dennis Hopper's Out of the Blue, let's say, that's what the characters in Prisoners are trying to hold on to, I think. And that's what's really interesting, because there was the impression that was kind of a dissipating world during the 2010s. You know, now with things like the opioid epidemic, it's probably whittled away for more. Social media has turned everyone into a crazy lunatic, apparently, especially in the United States. I mean, just observing from afar, I've never been, but you look like you're in some dire states for a while there. But I like the film. It's such a premise, and it's also such an actor man movie, but you can look past that and realize that it can be one of those things, but there's no reason one of these things can't be good. And there's a reason why people thought these things could be really good, and why they did make really engaging films. Maybe if an extremely talented filmmaker was trying to handle it, Denis Villeneuve, it could work extraordinarily well. Potentially. I think Prisoners works really well. If it's been, it's about almost 10 years since the film was released. Do tell me how you feel Prisoners has held up, if you're so inclined. If you feel as though the film was great then, maybe you feel as though it isn't so well now. I know at least one friend who has shared something to that opinion. Or perhaps you feel as though the film was strong then, you still think it's strong now. Maybe thought it was rubbish then, you still think it's rubbish. Maybe you don't like Villeneuve at all. Whatever, if you're so inclined, share however you feel. I don't want to feel like it's just some fascistic echo chamber here. I sincerely am open to any and all comments. Like I don't like the idea that I won't get challenged on anything. For example, I like getting challenged on things generally. No, I do. You know, this is like some sort of like, you know, vitriolic attack, and even then, it's kind of fun sometimes. Like, I'll be real. But actually, all the commenters have always been extremely nice. Like YouTube's a much different place from like 2007, 2008. It's kind of shocking. Like, I get rarely any, like, nasty comments. Like, maybe it's because no one watches this stuff, rightfully so. But, I mean, except on the far country, when all these, like, boomers and older are like, where's the real movie? And it's like, you didn't see that the thumbnail said 4 minutes. Okay, whatever. That's fine. It's just fun. I don't delete any comments. I just love seeing them there. Because it's just makes me smirk slightly. Seriously, turn this video off. Find better things to do. Most importantly, I mean, it can only go uphill from here. Have the best possible day and night you have ever imagined. Thanks again, my friends.